Even Kinnock.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and good morning to you. I just wanted to focus on the period between Parliament approving the withdrawal bill, assuming that we do in October, and when we leave the European Union in March 2019. Now, the Secretary of State has said he thinks that very substantial progress can be made on future relationship negotiations during that period. But do you really think that that's realistic, given that the European Parliament won't be voting on the withdrawal bill until February 2019?
Yes, I do think it's realistic, because I think it's in the interests of all parties and of businesses and citizens in both the UK and the EU to have the clearest possible definition of that future relationship by the time we enter into the implementation period. I think this is something which, from my conversations with both European parliamentarians and with member states, I think there's a growing awareness of the importance for businesses and citizens in their countries of knowing what the arrangements will be for the trade and market access to what will be Europe's #1 export market. I think that is something where there's a real mutual interest in making progress with this, and that's certainly part of the case that we'll be making in our white paper.
But don't you think that the institutional reality is that the European Commission will be changing in 2019, and there'll be European parliamentary elections? So neither the Commission or Parliament is going to be interested in engaging in discussions with the United Kingdom and potentially tying the hands of the newly created institutions, if you like, or following the rotation. So isn't it actually the political and institutional reality is that, in essence, no progress on the future relationship will be made at all? Well, until probably October of 2019, when there's a new commission.
I would rather turn that around, actually, to say that I think the current commission is highly ambitious with regards to resolving as many issues on this as possible. It will want, as part of its legacy and its record, to be a healthy agreement with the UK. And the European parliamentarians I meet also understand that this is an issue that they want to see real progress on in this Parliament. I also think the added focus that elections will give them, and there's always been the issue, and right from the start of this process we've seen that clear understanding that the European institutions do, now that the UK has triggered Article 50, they do want to ensure that we were out in time, but it wouldn't complicate the European elections for 2019 by having seats that might need to be available for UK MEPs and then to go away. I think that's something that we're all agreed on. But that actually, when people are having to go to their electorates and explain, they will want to explain that the EU will have a successful future trading relationship with one of its closest allies and one of its biggest trading partners. So I actually think we should look to the opportunities in that institutional change you talk about, rather than necessarily to assume it will be a problem.
Has the government made any contingency plans, though, for the possibility that once the vote has gone through here in Parliament, and in effect, as my colleague Pat McFadden has said, we've signed off on the 35 to 39 billion, so that piece of leverage is gone. What contingency plans is the government putting in place for the fact that once that has happened, the European Union will really just start to transfer us into the status of a third country and therefore reduce our leverage massively in the negotiation process?
Well, clearly there is contingency planning and continues to be contingency planning going on across government for all outcomes of this process. But our central scenario, and one that we see as becoming more likely as we progress for negotiations, is one where we do reach an agreement not only on the withdrawal agreement but on the future relationship, which we believe is in the interests of both the UK and the EU.
Do you accept that once the withdrawal agreement, and particularly the budgetary elements of it, are signed off, that our leverage in negotiating the future relationship is massively reduced.
Well, I think, as we've discussed at
with a
great
new
length already,
institution
that process of signing off the withdrawal agreement, having a meaningful vote in Parliament, and then writing into legislation the withdrawal agreement and implementation bill, that will be having regard to the framework for the future relationship. And we want to reach get into as much detail on that framework as possible. We also believe, as the Secretary of State has said, that more work can be progressed on the future relationship between agreeing that framework and the moment at which we leave the EU.
One final question, Chair, if I may. Who do you think, which part of the Commission do you think will be leading on the negotiation of the future relationship post 29th of March 2019?
Well, I think our focus should be to get as much progress on the future relationship before 29th of March 2019. I think it's speculative to talk about what happens after that moment.
But the assumption would be that we would be dealing with the Trade Directorate General as any other third country.
Well, as I say, I think our focus at the moment is to deal with the Commission that we have in front of us and to deal with Task Force 50 on making as much progress, not only on the withdrawal agreement, but also on the future relationship. And I believe as the time passes, there will be increasing pressure from European institutions, from European electorates on both the Parliament and the Commission to make progress on these issues as well.
Can I just say, interestingly, you had a witness before your committee a few weeks ago from the Centre for European Reform, and she made it clear from the European perspective that there is immense amount of willingness and desire on the part of the EU to get on with this and to strike agreement, not only on the withdrawal agreement, obviously finalise that, but also on the future framework. She used the phrase Brexit fatigue, and said that they've turned a page and want to move on as well. So there's really no desire for us to prolong this longer than necessary.
No, it's really just a question of leverage and where the leverage is and when it starts to disappear.
Okay.